Thanks for joining me. Today we are going to work with black cardstock, black card bases, and we're going to walk on the dark side. Thanks for joining me today. This is Jentastic Journey. So we're going to start out with some black cardstock. This is actually a card base that I made. And I'm picking out some different butterflies and dragonflies and trying to decide what I'd like to do. We're going to use a resist technique here. And this is going to be probably my second favorite card of the group. We're going to make a lot of cards today. I like to try and make as many cards as I can when I have a theme in mind. And this theme came to me when I was mentioning in my last video that I make tons and tons and tons of white card bases. Why don't I make black card bases? Because it's always harder, right? You have to put a lighter sheet on the inside. Not a problem. We are going to use some black card bases, and in some cases I'm going to put a different color on the outside as well, so it won't be all right onto the card base. But in this scenario, I am going to be using a resist technique and get these butterflies onto this cardstock. I did use my little cornstarch bag to prevent any of my fingerprints from adding some embossing powder where I don't want it. But I think we're going to use these big butterflies. They're absolutely gorgeous. I love the detail of them, and I think they will emboss beautifully. I also threw in a little butterfly just for good measure. So when you emboss with either a clear, or in this case I'm using a white embossing powder, or any color ink, quite honestly, you do want to use that cornstarch bag. Sometimes I forget it, and you'll see later in this video I forget it in one of the cards. You're going to want to start your heat gun so that it gets nice and heated up. You want it to preheat for like 30 seconds. And here you can see, this is why I love to use my stamping platform. I did not get a very good image on that second butterfly and even parts of that top butterfly, so we're going to re-ink it. Now the two big butterflies came from the same stamp collection and the little one above did not, so I'm wondering if that is my issue, that maybe there's a little height difference. Alright, well, I peeled off one at a time and it worked out just fine. Now I'm going to add some white embossing powder. This is just Wow bright white embossing powder. Make sure I get it all over. And this worked out really well. There is really no embossing powder where I didn't want it, so that's perfect. And I'll apologize in advance today. I put my camera on a different platform and it's attached to my desk, and so I think that when I'm pounding on my desk or doing different techniques, it's making the camera shake a little bit. So I will move the camera back to where it was and we'll try that again. So here I'm embossing the butterflies, and in this case, because I'm using a resist technique, you want to make sure that you really get it all done. And this is hard because I have a lot of ink and a lot of embossing powder, so I'm really trying to make sure I get it all. But you'll see when I go to work on this card that there's actually a couple of parts of this that I didn't quite emboss perfectly. So it happens, and we're going to make it work for us. Not a problem. I do like to always point out the issues I have, because we all have issues in card making. It's never a perfect process. It doesn't matter if you've been doing this for a year or 20 years. This is something that, we just all learn as we go, and I'm really trying to make sure, you can see with how long I'm spending on this, I'm really trying to make sure that I've got it all, but it didn't work on one part, so we'll get through it. I think that's really pretty all on its own, but I do want to put some greenery in the background, so I'm going to pull out some different greenery, and I can't decide if I want to stamp on this project or if I want to use some stencils, so we'll pull those out and see what we want to do. Okay, so I'm going to use some Distress Oxide ink, and this is Rustic Wilderness, and I'm going to create some more interest to the background of this card by adding a little greenery. And because I've already embossed with the white embossing powder these beautiful butterflies, I will not have a problem with stamping on top of them, because you can actually wipe it off later after you're done with the stencils. So I'm going to start by just putting a little bit of blue in this background. And again, I'm going right over these butterflies, and I'll be able to wipe that ink right off, no problem. But this is just giving a little bit of interest, a little bit more color, so I'm not needing to be super precise. I'm not doing a ton of blending or anything like that. Just want to get a little bit of color on here. Putting a little bit more on the corners than I am on the rest of it, and again, just to get a little bit of color. Next, I'm going to be using Speckled Egg, another Distress Oxide. I love the Distress Oxide inks, and I'm going to just put some color on the inside of here as well. And I'm blending that just a little bit with the blue color. Now I'm going to start with my stencil, and you really want to attach down your card, which I didn't do in this case. I'm masking off where I don't want the ink to go. I'm also holding it down a little bit with some of this. It's a Post-it brand removable tape, and I'll link everything in the description box below of anything that I use that I can find. Some of my stamps, because I've been doing this for a while, I don't remember where I got them because of the way I organize them. I cut all the stamps down and then I put them in categories in these little clear containers. And so that's a way that I organize my stamps, so it makes it hard for me to figure out where I got them from over time. Okay, so I really wanted to get to some of this greenery. I didn't want a lot of flowers in here, just want some greenery in the background, kind of behind these butterflies. And because I've already embossed the butterflies, you can see all this will look like it's behind them. And I'm going to take that out and reposition it so I can get some more greenery around this scene. And I'm careful not to get my fingers in the project just because Distress Oxide can stay wet for a little bit of time, so you want to make sure that you're not getting your fingers on them because it will make a fingerprint in the ink if the ink is not dry yet. And I love working with butterflies, but you could have used really anything for this background. I had some dragonflies out that I could have done as well, but I just thought these butterflies just had so much detail. I really, really appreciated how beautiful they were, and we'll put some embellishments on them later to give them a little pop of color. You'll see behind the scenes, please note that I am washing my hands pretty regularly, at least spraying them down with water and using one of my rags, because you want to make sure that you're not getting ink all over everything. I'm wiping down my workspace to try and make sure that we don't transfer any of all these inks that I'm using onto anywhere we don't want it. And you could use any stencils, you could use stamps as well for these backgrounds. I didn't want to put too much in the background, but I just wanted to give it a little bit of something. The fun with resist techniques like this is that you can put your main objects on this and then you can put stuff in the background so that it appears like it's behind it. And so I'm using a little bit of Twisted Citron. That's kind of a yellowish, limeish green color. It will look pretty with some of the green in the background, just give it a little bit more excitement. And I put some of the Rustic Wilderness into that citron color. I'm using a little bit of Abandoned Coral now, again a Distress Oxide. And I'm just gonna add some of these butterflies that are actually in this stencil set. Since this is a butterfly print, might as well add a couple of those. The daubers that I'm using are sponge daubers. I prefer those over the ones that have all the little bristles in them. They just work better for me. It's always personal preference, but that is what I'm using in this project. And here's where I'm going to wipe off the ink, and this is where I realized that I did not get part of that bottom butterfly is got some embossing powder that is not embossed. You can kind of see it there on the right wing, kind of towards the center. It looks kind of grayish now because the ink is getting onto that white spot, but I'll show you in a bit. It's not going to be a problem. I will use a white pen and we'll color that in a little bit, and otherwise I think it's a super pretty picture. I'm going to spritz this a little bit with some water, just also to allow those reactive inks of the Distress Oxide to react with the paper. Gives it just a little bit more fun. Another element, and again these Distress Oxides are kind of messy because they stay wet for a long time, so you want to make sure you're wiping down your workstation. Now, do I want to attach this directly to the card base, or do I want to put something in between? Because there's so much white on these butterflies, I decided to attach another layer between the card front and the card base. And this has just a little bit of a border, but I do like how that looks. It adds a little bit of weight to the card, but I'm okay with that. Most of my cards have to have extra postage anyway, and I know I'm going to add embellishments to these butterflies. It's one of my favorite things to do to butterflies. For this card, I'm using some double-sided tape that I can tear, so that makes it super fast and easy. I got this off of Amazon, and I'll include it as one of the links in the description box below. Just click on the more and the ... more, and you'll get to all the links and information about anything I used in this card. All right, so pulling off the backing, pulled off most of it, and then just gonna line it up, and then I'll pull out the other two pieces. Make sure my card base is the right direction. We've all done that where we, at least maybe I hope that all of us has done that once or twice, but I've done it where I've attached it to the wrong side of the card base. You can cut that card base then off and reattach it to another card base. If you ever do that, it's not a total loss. It's a loss of the card base, but that's it. Or you can try and pull it off too, I guess. I've never had any luck with that. This double-sided tape is pretty darn sticky. A lot of you use the technique where you push down part, usually the center of the card when you are are using this double-sided tape and then you push the rest down. I do that a little bit, but I usually can eyeball it pretty well, and I don't get too excited if it's not perfectly centered all the way around. So here we are so far, and it's a very pretty card, but it needs some stuff added to it. Gem embellishments. I love to add gem embellishments to butterflies, especially down the center of them, kind of where the caterpillar part is, I guess. I brought out some black ones and some color ones, and then I did have some stickers that are like gem stickers of butterflies that I thought would be cute for this project as well. And then I'm going to take a punch here. I am going to create a punch for my sentiment strip to go onto, and I'm going to use this decorative punch that I have. I got this from my sister for my birthday, and I use it quite often. Alright, and it was a little wider than the punch wanted it to be, so it didn't cut out perfectly, but it's okay. I want to use one of my sentiment strips on here. I print my sentiment strips on my computer onto white cardstock, and then I get to flip through it whenever I have one of these projects. I've got some bold sentiments, I've got some fun fonts, I've got some serious fonts, so a little bit of everything. Because there are 2 butterflies here, I thought I'd make this a happy anniversary card. It's a cute scene for an anniversary card, and I'm often in need of anniversary cards and then don't have them. I have lots of birthday cards, but I don't always have anniversary cards ready to go, so we'll make one ready to go here. Then I'm going to use the same punch, and that way we'll get to line it up a little bit with the black strip, and I think that'll look really cute. And I like that it's a little bit white so that we can bring out the white in the butterflies as well. And I'm going to put this on first so that we can then gem embellish the butterflies after that. Again, I'm going to use this double-sided tape because it's quick and easy. And this double-sided tape, I like it. It's pretty easy to get the backing off. Sometimes you get them and you have to kind of fight with them, and that's never any fun. Here I'm trying to line that up, and I think it looks cute. Cut a little strip off. It looks a little bit more symmetrical. And then I'm going to pop this onto some foam tape. I use my sticky scissors for this, so I have a pair of scissors that are just regular scissors. I think they are titanium, so they resist sticking. I use them just for sticky stuff, and I use my Tim Holtz small and long bladed scissors to do any sort of cutting or fussy cutting. I like how that looks. Now back to the gems. Am I going to use the black gems, or am I going to use something with some color? So I took out these butterfly stickers, and they look like gem stickers. I believe I got these from Hobby Lobby. It's their brand of the paper studio. I'm just going to put some of these butterflies throughout. I put them on top of the other butterflies, so it's kind of looks like an inside of the butterflies. I think that looks really pretty. These butterflies are in different sizes, which makes it nice. So I'm going to try and put this one on that butterfly that's hanging out there. And then now for the inside of the butterflies. One fell off, so that one's going to be my first one used. And I always try and use my pick tools that I have, but I end up using my finger for a lot of it because it doesn't always work for me. And I inevitably will go back to my craft tweezers because those are what works the best for me. I just didn't have them in front of me, so I'm going to have to look for them. So when I use butterflies, I like to put gems down the center. I think it just gives it a little bit of sparkle, and you can tell where the body of the butterfly is. Here's where I get my craft tweezers because they do the best for me. I'm going to use some smaller. This one I kind of did a big, a medium, and a small. I'm going to put some at the edges of the sentiment strip as well. I'm going to put some small ones on this upper little teeny tiny butterfly, and I think that adds a little bit of sparkle and some color. And then where I didn't finish the embossing, I'm just going to use a white pen. It's a white gel pen, and I'm just going to kind of go over the lines of that butterfly where it turned out being kind of grayish because the embossing powder didn't heat set. Probably nobody would notice that but me. If I have the tools, might as well add a little bit. Okay, and then we need an inside for this card because you don't want to use, obviously, black cardstock. You wouldn't be able to write anything unless you used, I guess, a white pen. But I typically put something on the inside so that I can write a sentiment and maybe stamp a sentiment. But in this case, I think I'm just going to stamp a couple of butterflies because I do like to do something on the inside of all of my cards. Just like I like to do something to all the envelopes. Today, we're not going to have a chance for you to see me do the envelopes because we have a lot of cards we're going to make, and I don't want to keep this video too long. So because I had these smaller butterflies, I'm going to use some of them. I'm just going to use this acrylic block, which is always touch and go for me. I'm using my Memento black ink, and I always struggle with stamping. It's the hardest part of card making for me, but I did do a pretty good image there. Memento is a great ink if you have a lot of detail, and these butterflies have a lot of detail. I don't usually go wrong with my Memento ink. It doesn't ever squish out. It just usually makes a really good crisp image. So here I didn't get all of that butterfly, so I went back over it. And luckily, it was a fairly easy one to see. I think that turned out really cute. For card number 2, I'm going to use a black piece of cardstock as my card front, and we're going to use some circle stencils. I have lots of circle stencils. I think I always think that I don't have them, so then I pick them up when I see them at the store. These are some really inexpensive ones. I get these sometimes at the dollar store or sometimes at Hobby Lobby. These come from a set, but they don't really coordinate where they're going to dots, and the lines don't really coordinate with the other piece. But I'm going to use this one with all different sizes, and then we'll use these other lined and dotted circles later on. So I'm going to tape down with my Post-it tape, and I'm going to then also tape down my stencil, and I'm reusing the pieces that I had earlier, which is why my fingers, you'll see by the end of this, my fingers are all full of ink, but I do keep wiping them off quite often, so it's not getting on the cards at least. Okay, back to my Distress Oxides. I love Distress Oxides on black cardstock. It looks really muted and chalky looking, and I'm just going to use some colors on different aspects of this. Some of the ink sunk into this cardstock. It is not watercolor cardstock or anything like that. I changed my mind on using the big daubers, and I'm going to use some small daubers that I have, and that'll make it easier so that I'm not mixing inks too terribly. And you'll see sometimes I do re-ink the same spot because it is absorbing some of the ink, and so I just go over it a couple of times in some cases. This is Speckled Egg. I love this color. I think it's beautiful. And here you see I'm going back over and making sure that those colors are nice and bright. On to the next color, and I'm speeding this up pretty significantly so that you don't have to spend as much time as I did getting all the ink on here and making sure we got every little circle done. The colors I chose for this project are Peacock Feathers, Candied Apple, Abandoned Coral, Picked Raspberry, Twisted Citron, Salty Ocean, Seedless Preserved, and Speckled Eggs. These are a lot of my Distress Oxide inks. I don't have a ton of them. This is the majority of them. Okay, and the big reveal here, I think that looks really good. There's a couple where I got a little bit of the other ink inside of it, but now we're going to use, this has just little dots inside of the circles, so I'm going to try and use my Hero Hues Pigment Ink and just put a little bit of white inside of these, just a few of them. And this is one of the best things about working on black cardstock is you can get all these fun effects by using some lighter colors. Distress Oxides sit nicely on top. Some of it, because it's a pigment and a dye ink, some of it does sink in, but a lot of it sits on top. So first I'm going to dry the Distress Oxide inks, and then I'm going to go over it with some white ink as well. But I wanted to dry it a bit first so that I'm not transferring the ink all over when I use the white. Okay, now I'm going to use my Hero Hues Pigment Ink. I'm just going to make a few over the top of some of the other circles. It's going to be a pretty look. It's hard to see it until I pull it off to see where if I've done enough or too much or what the case is. Set that aside for now, and then we'll work on the sentiment. Let that dry a little bit further. And I pulled out some of my circle dies. I haven't used them all, and we're going to cut out a white circle and a black circle, but one of them will have a little bit of decoration to it with that middle die. It doesn't cut out, it just a little decoration in between. So I'm going to make a white circle for the die sentiment, and then I'm going to put a black one behind it. I'm actually going to put a purple piece as the layering, and this one will have the little cutouts in it. I'm using my removable Scotch tape. I've never had a problem with this ever tearing my paper, and it holds my dies on perfectly. And I keep my dies on a magnetic sheet in these little plastic envelopes, and they work out really well for me. You can also cut out a circle if you don't have circle dies by just using a glass or a jar, making a line around them, and then fussy cutting it out. You never have to worry about not having all the supplies that someone has. There's always a way to kind of get around it. And with the circles I made on the card front, you can use stamps, you can use different stencils, different shapes. You can also use an eraser tip, a flat eraser tip. I've used that before on the tip of a pencil, and you can just dip that into ink and put dots all over. Lots of different ways to make this effect. And so you can see there that that has a cute little design around on the purple part of that cardstock layer. And I've decided I want to make the white not so stark white, so I'm going to put the stencil back on here and make a few circles. And I'm just going to use the daubers from what I used earlier. We're just going to make a few of them and hopefully make sure they're not too dark because we're going to want to see the sentiment. And I wanted to primarily do just the outer ones. I do get carried away and start doing other ones. You'll see that there's two sides to every piece of paper, so if you don't like it, you can flip it over and do it again, and you'll see that that is what happens to me because I get a little bit overexcited with all my colors. So I take this off and that looks okay, it's just there's a lot in the middle, so I'm going to use a piece of that tape and I'm just going to keep it adhered. So I used some ink to go around the edges and then I go in with the blue and it's too much. We're going to flip it over and start over. And here I'm just going to put a little bit of ink around the edge. We're going to start it off this way so I don't get carried away with too much ink at the end. It's also a lot easier to hold it when there's not little dots all over the inside of it. And then I push that down on some of that Post-it tape. And then I'm just going to quickly just daub a little bit of ink and do it mostly around the outsides. And I'm not adding any ink. This is all from when I was using these daubers before. And you can see that's coming out nice and light, which is exactly what I was looking for. I'm going to turn this into a birthday card, so we'll look for a birthday sentiment. Okay, and I picked out a circular birthday sentiment that's going to fit perfectly inside of that circle. And I'm going to use my stamping platform. I cut out a sticky mat and put that on there, and that holds my paper really nicely. Line that up, and then I'm going to stamp this in some black ink, some black Memento ink, and that'll coordinate with the card front. My stamping platform is great because I'm going to want that to be a really crisp black. I want to make sure that none of the rest of the ink is going to be too dark. I want this birthday sentiment to be super dark. So I end up inking that 3 times and it came out perfect. I'm going to use a tape runner and I'm going to adhere this to the purple circle, and then I may change the orientation depending on where this is. I don't want it to cover up too many of my pretty circles, so I may go with a landscape card depending on where I like this birthday sentiment to go. And I took out some silver string, but I might end up putting some ribbon on there instead. I have this pretty sparkly ribbon. I think that's actually going to look even better than the string. That string might get a little lost amidst all those muted colors. I'm going to use my Barely Art Precision Craft Glue to adhere the ribbon and make sure I get it where I wanted it. I'm going to use some foam tape to adhere the purple circle. I'll just give it a little bit more dimension as well, and that'll help hold down that ribbon as well. And I'm always kind of heavy on the foam tape. I almost didn't, and then I was feeling guilty, so I added some more. Just in case when it's in the mail, you don't want it to bend in certain spots, so might as well go for it, right? Alright, so I made a decision on where I wanted that. I'll put a little bit more glue on this ribbon, adhere it to the back, and then I'm going to add some foam tape to this card front so that it's not wavy with that kind of thicker ribbon in the back. First I decided to punch out a couple of the corners. I think that's kind of a neat look when you have only a couple of the corners punched, and then I'll do the same thing with the card base and make that match real nicely. You don't have to do it with the card base as well, but I thought it would look cute. I always think it's kind of a nice touch when the card base, I'm using the wrong end, the wrong punch, but once I figure it out, it all comes out good. But I think that when you change the shape of a card, it gives it a little more interest. And there we go. This definitely turned out to be one of my favorite cards. And then I chose a lavender insert. When I store my cardstock, I cut some into smaller pieces and I keep some full sheets. When I need them, I can just pull out the size that I need. And I decided to just use, again, one of the daubers that we used earlier. And I'm just putting a little bit of ink on the outside of it. And this is Peacock Feathers is the color that I'm using. And again, that'll just make it look almost like it has a 3rd layer, and I think it was a good touch. And here's where I'm going to pop it up onto some foam tape. And today I think I run out of 2 of my foam tape rolls. Time to order more. And then next I'm going to adhere the insert. This lavender color is really pretty. I get large packs of paper from Hobby Lobby when it goes on sale. If you look at their advertisements, if you're in the United States, they have stuff that goes on sale just about every other week. So just look at their advertisement on their website, and their Paper Studio paper cardstock is really nice. Comes in lots of colors. This was a pastel set that I got. And here I'm just going to again use those same daubers, make just a couple on the inside, just the spots, just a couple, because I want to be able to write some things in this card. I'm going to put some in each corner, and this is where you can see that either there's ink on the back of the stencil or there's ink on my fingers, but there's ink that's transferring a little bit, but it's okay because they're circles, and so the ink mistakes look a little bit like circles anyway. But I do wash my hands again after this part right here, because if it keeps happening a lot, then you kind of have to stop what you're doing and figure out where the ink is coming from. In this case, I'm trying to fix it in a couple spots, and then I get more ink in other places. So, and then I decided to go with that top corner too, just a few. I put a lot in that first corner, so no need to do it so heavy everywhere else. Just a few. I think that turned out really cute. Let's take a look at this birthday card that we made today using our Distress Oxide inks on a black card front. And then we made a few circles on the inside, and that is probably my favorite. And then we have this card that we did a resist technique and added some gem embellishments and some fun in the background using our Distress Oxide inks. On the inside of this card, we've just got a couple of those pretty butterflies. Join me for part 2 of the dark side of card making. If you would, please hit the like button if you enjoyed this content today. And also you can subscribe to my channel. I do create 2 videos per week. And then if you hit the notification bell, you're notified of when those 2 videos come out. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks so much for watching.